Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me today in the Locker Room. I'm Alan Locher. Two-time Emmy Award-winning actor Kevin Mambo can currently be seen in the Netflix drama Hit and Run. The series tells a story of a man searching for the truth behind his wife's death who becomes caught up in a dangerous web of secrets and intrigue stretching from New York to Tel Aviv. Kevin plays a New York City police detective with a wry sense of humor who has seen it all and nothing can faze him. The series is streaming now on Netflix. Kevin is no stranger to the small screen. He has had prime roles on hit series such as Luke Cage and High Maintenance, and daytime fans will remember him for his two-time Emmy-winning role as Marcus Williams on Guiding Light. His other film and TV credits include Cadillac Records, Nina, Law and Order Criminal Intent, Law and Order SVU, Blacklist and Elementary, just to name a few. Kevin has also had an impressive list of onstage roles as well. He played the title character in the Tony Award-nominated Fella and brought his talent to the role of Mephala in Book of Mormon. He was also seen in the revival of The Color Purple and the Public Theater's Fortress of Solitude. I'm so looking forward to catching up with my Springfield friend, Kevin Mambo. Please welcome two-time Emmy Award winner, Kevin Mambo. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Al, how are you?
I am good.
It's great to see you.
It's great to see you. It's been a long time.
Yes.
When you hear, yeah, it has been that long. That happened towards the end of Guiding Light. I grew that in and never got rid of it. Sort of, I think it was my rebellion after my mother passed away. I didn't shave my beard and it stayed. So when you hear those two words, Guiding Light, what immediately pops in your mind?
It's just such a whirlwind. It began in such a strange way and ended in such a strange way. I was a student at USC in my senior year, and I had auditioned in Los Angeles. They were looking to put someone in a contract, and I ended up flying out to New York for spring break. Just, I flew out to New York. I came out, stayed at the Novotel, came to the studio, read, and I'll never forget when I finished my scene, Jerry was on camera, and the only thing he said was that I knew that right there was probably going to be a good stamp of approval. And then I came back and I think it was to be hired to be a love interest for Kat, right? For Neil Long.
Yeah.
Played David. And they said, he was really great, but he's too young for this. And was finishing up the semester. And then I got a call saying, we are interested in putting you on contract. We don't know how or what, but when you're done school, come on out. So we're just such an unorthodox way to even start something like that.
I didn't realize you were still in school. What an amazing opportunity.
Talk about the actor's dream. Like you're walking out of class with a job.
Yeah, and right? Not just a job, a contract job.
Yeah. And
wow.
And then by the time everything had happened and it was coming to an end, we had a new producer, Paul Rausch, and the show was going in other directions. I sort of wasn't really told a whole lot of what was happening, and so it all kind of just, instead of being defined, really just sort of petered away. So it kind of ended as strangely as it started. I was sort of like, you get nominated after 3 months, you win. Huge surprise. Yeah. And then the next year it happens again. And then you're off for, 24 days out of the month, but you get nominated again for some reason. It ended as weirdly as it began.
It's such a strange thing to work, as an actor in daytime when you're really at the whim of new producers and new head writers coming in. That just, and for daytime viewers, it's such a odd thing as well because they,
I was a kid, at that time. I was 20, 22, 23. And, new writers and producers and whoever is going to come in, not only necessarily with their own agendas, but
Yeah.
their own strengths and weaknesses as well, which is going to help shape things no matter what. So it was kind of a new thing and a new way of doing things. It was a very jarring turn.
Yeah, I can only imagine. But what, a great start and a unfortunate ending.
But a learning
You know.
experience all the way through. I mean, I never got to think about doing grad school, so I got to get paid to do grad school.
I'm laughing because I just got a text message while we're talking from Brian Buffington who says, "How did it feel? How did it feel to beat out Brian Buffington for one of your Emmys? That's a pretty impressive feat."
And
He
if I
cracks.
remember, Brian, you were really cool about it, and you gave me a guitar. Well, where it is, a
he
12-string black Yamaha.
he cracks me up, that one. He is a funny dude. Funny dude. I want to come back to Guiding Light. Let's talk about Hit and Run first on Netflix. Tell us about the detective you play.
Yeah, Ellis Newkirk. It was very interesting and a lot of fun. I, as you know, tend to have a medium to large personality, and it was a lot of fun and a lot of good work to be able to really work on something that was so much more quiet and so much more subdued. Definitely present, but just, really working on that muscle where you're pulling your audience into you as opposed to necessarily being out here.
Hmm.
And it's, that's what I find too. You're on stage, you have to be here, but there does come a point where that's working and humming so well, you start to pull them back in. So it's interesting to kind of to be working between media. I was
Hmm.
working in LA at the Pantages doing Book of Mormon. And then during the daytime, I was shooting the Nina Simone film. And then I did a guest spot on Mistresses. Uh, and it was really,
My God, you were all over the place.
we were
Like,
there we were there for a while. So it was, it was good to like be there and see folks or just have meetings or meet friends. And just, it's nice when you're in a show to be able to sit for a while. We were there. We got to be there for a few months. But having to really like switch modes between some of this really super quiet, intimate work on camera all during the day, through the day, and on camera in the studio with, musicians and the soundtracks. And then later that night, you are in a much more lively, surreal, raucous, full on, full tilt musical.
oh, I mean, you're
So
not
it was
kidding.
fun to like
You're not
really
kidding. You're not kidding. I love that musical.
and be able and just switch gears every day and just every day back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That was actually very cool.
Huh. And Hit and Run is your second Netflix series. You were in Luke Cage.
Luke Cage was a lot of fun.
Were
We
you a
got
big superhero person growing up?
huge. I feel like the 12-year-old, it's like I did Luke Cage, and there are some other Marvel things that I'd like to tackle, but this is the stuff this is my youth. Like the
Yeah.
guys and girls who are actually producing all of this stuff are really my age. We watched all the same thing. You can see all the same references, all the same stuff. It's interesting to look through a lens that's that long. I was saying this to someone the other day. Like I was looking at something simple. It was like a garbage truck or a tow truck. And I was saying, I remember when I was a kid, we had these books in the library about what everything's going to look like in the future. But I was like, the trucks look exactly like they did in the books that they were making in 82 with like the snub noses and the long wide windows. So it's interesting to see after decades, this stuff kind of become relevant. I watched Akira in high school. For those like anime geeks,
Hmm.
and but I watched Akira in high school before they did the English dub. So my best friend and I, for a year and a half, were watching the Japanese dub of Akira.
Wow.
You can only
What
get like
what
a fifth of what's really going on, right?
what was your favorite superhero or Marvel, character as a kid?
I kind of um I started to in high school gravitate towards Frank Miller. I was also a big fan of Neil Gaiman and Sandman. And I thought that some of the, you're a kid and you're reading, superhero stuff or Conan the Barbarian. There is a certain level that they're not, a certain not love threshold that they're not going to cross. And I think that, the mid to late 80s and the advent of basically graphic novels for adults found a way to sort of mesh the two and be able to use imagery and tell adult storytelling on the page, which I think is a very important turn in terms of media, because now it's a third of what we do. You walk into a meeting and they say, well, what's your movie going to look like? And you just kind of open the book and it's already got storyboards.
Crazy. What what did you think when you first saw Black Panther?
I really liked it. And I also had a couple friends in it. I was very proud of them. And it sounds so simple to people, but it's very important, particularly for younger people, to show them things that they may be too afraid to imagine, but show it to them, or show them things and say that I am absolutely capable of this, and therefore so are you. It is really so very powerful, more than people think that it is. I mean, I've had even Vince Williams. I've had a handful of mentors who gave me, even in the briefest amount of time, seeds that grew later.
Hmm.
You know,
How did he do that for you?
when I first came onto the show, um,
And for folks watching, Vince played Ham
he
Speaks.
played Ham Speaks in the Towers. I had been the one to suggest being a musician. Um, I said, yeah, I speak some languages and I play saxophone. I said I could be a sax player from Europe. And then of course, then the Dino was a perfect kind of, joining. But I remember when I first came to town, the very first weekend, and I'm a scared kid coming to New York. I'm living in Midtown. I mean, everything is, when you first move here, before you can kind of see
You
through
never
the
lived
noise.
in New York before coming for Guiding Light?
I had never, ever. I had only been here for the screen test months before, which means I had been like in a 4-block radius, like the Novotel and the studio, Carnegie Deli to get a sandwich, and then back on the plane. Like it was 3-block radius. So I really didn't get a chance to experience the city. And the weekend that I came, he had been planning to hang out. He called me and said, I'm so glad you're coming. I'm so excited that you're going to be here. Let's talk about, what things you may or want to do. I got into town. He wasn't around. He had a death in his family in Louisiana. And he said, well, I can't be here. It left a long message on my answering machine. I don't know where he got the number from. I can't be here, but here's my number. And here's the number of 3-4 other guys who are waiting to hear from you. Here's like the clubs and then the music scene on the weekends and the places you guys should go. And he set my whole week up in the midst of
Wow.
dealing with a death in his own family.
Oh, I have
He wanted
chills.
to make sure that I was okay and that, that I was taken care of, just landing and just making sure that was going to be, yeah.
You just got a big hello from Wally White, who says, "Hello, my wonderful Kevin. I miss seeing you in person. Truly
Hey,
one of the kindest
Wally.
Wow, that's so awesome of Vince to do that.
It really was.
And I think I have this right, but you started playing piano at 8,
Yes.
saxophone at 10, and
Yes.
the guitar at 19.
Yes.
Who first introduced you to music?
My parents were both in science, so it wasn't. But my mother always had music on in the house. I think that the music side really came from my mother's side. My dad wasn't much of a dancer, so we'd, go to family parties. We'd be my mother and myself on the dance floor instead.
Yeah, I can
Um,
relate.
and I just it was one of those things growing up that belonged to me. So no matter what was going on, and
Mm,
we grew up as an African family in the Canadian prairies in the 80s. Definitely nobody around that looked like us. It's all of those kinds of things. But at the end of the day, I knew that that was something that belonged to me. So whether it was in jazz, competing we were in competitive jazz, in nationally competitive bands, which were really great, and that was also just a great experience in terms of learning and music and archiving and history, right? History through learning music.
mm.
Um, it was always and still is really a part of a lot of what I do. I'm working on a show right now called Flying Hobos, which I co-wrote and
Mm.
directed. And it is about the first two African American men who fly across the country in 1932.
Oh wow, a
So
stage show?
it is a stage show that we have at the first incarnation that's designed for our kids and for schools. And so we
Wow.
follow, we
To
try we
educate them about somebody from history
yeah, and
because
but we also like include STEM, which is like science. So they help us figure out how much gas to get from what town to what town. The two gentlemen, Car it- Thomas Cox Allen and James Herman Banning, they had to almost like a green book fly to friendly places. So they had to strategically, after
wow.
building this plane, find places where they could land and they could get donations for gas or lodging or food, and design what was called the gold book, sorry, and have citizens sign the wings of the plane, and they would be on this journey with them. So this is
Oh,
a
do you know how you were introduced to these two gentlemen? Like how
it
you
was brought to me. Louisa Jagger, who is also a producer in the company and playwright, through a friend. He said, she said, I want to work on this show and just sort of buff it up. And through a mutual friend, he said, I know the perfect person. So I came on, we wrote it together, I directed and wrote some music for it as well. We had been, before COVID, taking it out on the road to schools, and the response from the kids is just amazing. When they realize that you're telling them something that's real, that it's not a
Mhm.
rook, they realize that you're not here lecturing them. When you ask them for help in order to get to the next places, suddenly there is investment.
Hmm.
So that has been really, really great, really rewarding. So the company's Greatest Stories Never Told, and we're working on a handful more shows. And we had figured out in the midst of COVID how to um, do the show virtually. We had been traveling to some of these schools and some of these very, very, and when I say really rural schools, like the schools we're talking about that don't have broadband, that are kind of really cut out of the loop, that are not getting good lunch in schools, all of that kind of stuff. So it's like these are the places that we're really trying to target. The
That's
kids that we're
incredible.
really trying to reach. Um,
You
and
know,
so
one
we
thing.
work with HBCUs, and now that we're virtual, we can have an HBCU host our show, and throughout the day, bust in 3, 4, 5 schools that are close by who would never be able to get, that kind of experience just being where they are, and sort of bring out what we do up here, right? And just
Yeah.
and bring that, as a gift
But
to them.
what a fun way to learn about something that really happened in history.
Mm-hmm. And when
That's
I perform in it sometimes, we have a rotating cast. I sort of like to keep my behind the table responsibilities, but I do jump in. And I remember one day telling the story, and all of a sudden, and we lost power, and the plane was going down, and we crashed, and this girl was sitting in the front row. She had to be about 9 years old. Looked me in the eye and looked around, so no one was listening, and said, "So what happened next?" they are engaged and they are involved if you really want to engage and involve them. They are so prepared
Yes.
for it. And I feel too, like in our current, unfortunately, in our current declining educational situation, kids are very hungry. They're very hungry.
Yeah.
They're very thirsty. I'm very fortunate I got to have an amazing private and public schooling growing up in Canada. But as I came here, whatever, 25 some years ago, and was doing, children's theater or working with kids, I started to really see where some of the gaps are, in terms of education. So we're adding to that, and we're adding to that in a really fun way.
Bravo. I mean, one thing I feel like I clearly can see during this whole pandemic is the lack of education and also the lack of wanting to deal with things that happened in history,
Right.
And
Well, it's getting further and further apart, right? You know, I'm not making it like an us them sort of conversation, but those who are and have they've they started sprinting a year and a half ago. They're already got their tutors. They've already got the kids situated. A year and a half ago, they had already laced up, and they are kind of in the horizon. While other folks are kind of trying to figure out, right, how to put it together. What do you do if you are, you work for the MTA, you're a bus driver, or you're working at the hospital, and you have three kids, and you're living, at 110th Street? Like, how are you negotiating everything? Or you're living, right in the South Bronx. How are you negotiating? The other folks
yeah,
have already had a plan, and they are long gone. So I'm really hoping that we can at least start putting a halt to illness and infection rates, if only to start dealing with inequity, because inequity is not a sustainable model, no matter what people think. You can keep driving that wedge, but eventually there's some kind of natural correction.
uh,
Often
I
not
want.
great.
I wanted to go back. You mentioned your mom used to play music. Do you remember what was playing in the house?
Oh, I mean, it was everything from Jacksons to Cool and the Gang to Roberta Flack to Hugh Masekela to Kenny Rogers to Gordon Lightfoot. I mean, it was we had Paul Simon. We had a huge palette of sound in our house, and my mom was very encouraging of that. And I started playing jazz at 10, 11, big band jazz and modern
Wow.
jazz, and she just always just encouraged it, and so it always kept growing, and it was always encouraged. So it's music has been a really important part of my life. My keyboard, my writing keyboard is right here.
Yeah, right there. Who were some of your biggest influences? The names you just mentioned, or others for you?
Gosh, I was at the age I am now. I was sort of at the crossroads of a lot of different things. So I was doing, jazz in school, but I'm also was at the birth of hip hop. So I was listening to Run DMC, and I was listening to KRS One and Boogie Down Productions, and the birth of that music, and then the birth of the house music scene. But I was also playing a lot of like Billy Squire and Led Zeppelin and some Metallica, some Motley Crue, some Rats. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I had a very, very wide palette of music. I mean,
Wow.
eclectic, just a very wide palette.
Totally. That's the best way to be is have an eclectic. I think it makes you better you know, in that profession, really, in music. You mentioned you were born in Zimbabwe and grew up in Canada. How long were you in Zimbabwe for? Do you remember living there?
Very, very young. I was very young when we left. I really did grow up in Canada. My brother was born in Toronto, and then we ended up emigrating into the Midwest.
Gotcha, gotcha. And then you studied political science,
Hmm.
right?
At McGill
Uh,
University. Say hi to
and,
Penelope.
and
Hey
what were you
there.
thinking of? What were you thinking of
Well,
doing?
my parents came from, medicine and sort of the Southern African boarding school tradition. I was really interested in doing political science and African history, and maybe doing diplomat work at the UN. I thought
Wow.
being able to do bridging work would be really satisfying, to be able to bridge communities and cultures, etc. That was my original goal. Didn't work out that way. Didn't work.
It definitely didn't. So then who or what influenced you on becoming an actor and musician?
So I go away to a boarding school when I'm 15. I absolutely don't want to go. So it's a huge fight with the parents, but this is kind of the tradition that they come from. So apparently it's going to happen.
Apparently, with no choice.
But I said, okay, well, let's compromise. If I'm going to be, like a real boarding school, like the Blazers, house tie, rugby teams, like the whole thing. I said, so if we're going to do that, I would really like to keep playing. That's my caveat. Because their thing was, we're, good school, good college, etc. I said, well, I would like to keep playing, at least that. And
That's fair.
We found a place. The music teacher seemed kind of cool. He sent me material that they had recorded at the school, but had like gone to the studio. I thought it was fantastic. I learned the stuff. I showed up to class. He decided he wanted to play this one tune. I thought it was a kind and respectful thing to have had learned the solo that he played on said song and play it in rehearsal. He didn't take too kindly, so we started having a little bit of a split. And some stuff happened between us, but long story short, to spite him, I joined the school play. And the school play was that? The King and I. So 10 minutes late, fast forward 2 days, now I'm the lead of the play. And I've never done anything like it. And so I thought maybe I will incorporate whatever music techniques I have to use as a guideline for this for now. So that was kind of like the first foray. It was kind of meshing it together. What's in harmony, what's in discord, what is it crescendo, where does it slow down, and started trying to use music first to kind of, and so I did that for a while, dropped out, ended up going to McGill, political science, and then it just hit me one day. This is I enjoy the law and that, but I'm not the guy that's going to be reading briefs until 4 a.m. and then killing it in the courtroom at 8:30. That's a very specific person, and I feel like I don't know that I'm that guy. And so I had to say,
well, I think
the law will always be there.
Yeah,
It'll
always can go back.
Yeah. So in the meantime,
you found your path.
In the meantime,
you found your path.
Yeah.
And to have a job right out of college. You said you screen tested. Do you remember who you screen tested with for Guiding Light?
I screen tested with Melissa Hayden.
Ah, awesome.
My girl. I love her. And I just saw her a few years ago when I was doing Moorman.
Oh, nice.
We got to hang out a little bit. Yeah, I'm not on the West Coast that often, so I don't get to see folks out there that often. But the last time I was there, we got to spend some time together. Yeah, it was with Melissa. It was with Melissa Hayden.
One of our fans just said Vince Williams was such a pioneer, being the first African-American contract player on Guiding Light. And Guiding Light always had the Midas touch for casting African-American actors. How did you feel they, at the beginning? Because I know they really wrote for you quite a bit. They wrote for all of you at that time.
Well, yes and no. I mean, the thing ultimately was we kind of got into a bit of we kind of got to a bit of a crossroads. When you are organizing and setting up whatever show or system you have, you have this tier of things happening, right? And then you have this tier of things happening supporting it, and then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it turned out that it looked like our tier was starting to buck the system. So it started getting bigger than it was supposed to turn into. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, we got to get you a love interest. They hired Sharon, and then we need you a nemesis. And then we hired Taye Diggs, and then Jeffrey Ewing. We need to get. And all of a sudden now we started building this thing. But I think on our way to building it, the rug got pulled and it just went another direction.
It crashed.
And more than anything, I just wasn't really aware that that's what was going to happen. Had I known that, it'd been a little easier, right?
Yeah.
But just to not know, and then open your schedule and be like, I'm off for 2 months. I'm going to go on vacation. What's going on? You know?
Yeah,
just to kind of not know and not really kind of be a part of the fabric in whatever direction things are going. We want to do this. We know, there's a Latino explosion going on right now. We want to build a family, whatever it is. But nothing was ever discussed. So it was, and I found as an actor between, there and a couple of other places that I had worked, the discussion doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
It only takes 2 or 3 minutes
and that's
to say, this is what I think, this is what I want, and this is where we're headed. And then you are very clear about what's going on. You're not in confusion about what that is,
That's why it's so hard I think in daytime when there's so many changes like that, to the powers that be, whether executive producer or head writers, it just changes the whole dynamic.
And then how you want to start building real long and concrete arcs. It's there. I'm sure it's very difficult to do that with musical chairs, right? Because everyone's bringing their strengths and their weaknesses, and
and their preferences, preferences for sure. Yeah. Well, you definitely worked with an incredible, talented group of actors. Let's start. Can you share what you remember about the late great Michael Zaslow?
Zaslow and I got on from the first moment. And when you walk onto set sometimes working on a show like this or some other things, you always find that it's really like the real titans, the real heavy foot people are the ones that are the easiest going and the kindest. I remember I walked on set when Zaslow was there the first time, and he introduced himself and we started talking, and he was so interested just to rap. And I understood too that not only was he that kind of person, but he was also interested in just sort of like making me know and feel that, yeah, we're probably on camera going to just be nemesis all the time, but God, this is great. And I'm glad to have you here, and just put me at ease. Really,
I have to ask, because you mentioned, to come from college, what was your first day like? Do you remember your first day walking on set? Were you nervous?
Oh, I was terrified. You don't come to New York City and not be like terrified. Everything's moving. When you're here long, when you're in the city longer, you know what to ignore. Yeah. But when you first arrive, you actually are watching every single thing. That's not possible.
Your head's spinning.
You're doing this, and it was my second time working in 3-camera. I had done when I was a sophomore. I had done a guest spot on Family Matters, but the cameras were much further back, and we had a live studio audience. And I was also studying for a final on set.
Wow.
We had in the truck, I had my I had my books, or on the set, I had a couple of books open, and I was in the middle of a final. I barely could accept the job to get it. But when I came on to do our first few days, The human eye is attracted to motion, right? Or change. So just imagine you're trying to execute a very simple scene that's maybe, 20 or 30 lines, like nothing serious, just a placeholder to let people know what's going on. And all of a sudden, I just hear all this whooshing. And I'm trying not to look up, but I'm kind of looking across. And I see all three cameras just kind of sliding around the floor, doing their own little ballet. And nobody, I think it was only Jerry, but nobody had really told me that, when the red light is on, that camera's live. It's a simple one, but someone forgot that one.
Somebody forgot to share that little tidbit.
Someone forgot that one. So every time, I would sort of be in the scene, and then the light would come on, and I would just. It took about a half hour. Everyone was very patient. It took about a half hour for me to stop. I was like, I don't know what to do, and then someone said, it's just human. You track motion. It's just you'll just learn how to do it. And I remember it being that experience. But after that, just really being welcomed with open arms. It was really, really nice. It was really, really nice.
And
that was one of the really ladies. Great things that I loved about working there, which I really don't see often in other places outside of the theater, is that it was really an egoless zone from top to bottom in the whole building, for a long time, not the whole time, but for a long time. And
good bunch of people.
Yeah, it was
and it's also
and it's a special thing that you sort of recognize later. Yeah, I've been in touch with Roy, and I'm gonna go and work with him, and Brian Mertis and I worked on some theater stuff together, and I know Ron does well. It had that element to it,
Yeah, you had a lot of theater people. Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk. Wendy Moniz, Sharon Leal, Amelia Marshall.
Yeah,
talk about some of those leading ladies that you got to work with.
Sharon and I haven't seen each other in a long time, but her best friend Juliana. One of her best friends, Juliana, that she grew up with, is married to the musical director from Antibalas. So Aaron and I would see each other every day when I was starring in Fela. So I would see Juliana every day and just hear how she was doing. Amelia and I have not seen each other in a long time. But when she moved out of the neighborhood in Harlem, I moved into the neighborhood in Harlem, like Broadway and 158 area. And a lot of us were up there. She was up there, Petronia, me, Kelly, a handful of folks were up there, Jeffrey.
I love Amelia. I didn't really know her well until afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
I love Amelia. She's a great gal.
Is she out west now?
No, she's back in New York.
Okay.
Back in New York.
So we had that. And
your friendship with Wendy, the Dinah and Marcus, was phenomenal.
It really was. And I wish that we had been able to kind of figure out what to turn it into. I feel like, our the strength of our show was just sort of it's ease, right? The people, it's ease, it's humbleness, it's openness. That was the place that people were coming back to. This is not the place that people were coming to for like all the hijinks. By the same token, how great would it have been for for Dinah and Marcus to be helping Frank with a murder mystery,
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like we had a lot of stuff, but I feel like we also missed taking some interesting chances that people wanted a team that strong to participate in. I mean, it's all hindsight, right? It's all Monday morning quarterbacking in the end. But
when you think back, what do you think you learned from that experience at Guiding Light?
I learned a handful of things. I learned when, even in the midst of a machine, a very big machine, if something is wrong or something's out of place, stand behind that and call it out. The people that try to tap dance and get, sort of play the temperature of the room, I always found were the people that get washed out in the wind. The people that kind of stood firm no matter what their position was, right or wrong. And I always found that helped. When I came on, I was really watching, Zaslow and Kim and Justin, and they were kind of my guides quietly. I would just go on my off time and watch them working.
And isn't that the best opportunity that you don't even know you're really getting until you're in it?
But I was there. And I was like, I'd watch them and heard the three of them, Jerry, and I would just watch. And then just watch. And I was like, like I said, I didn't get to go to grad school. So here I am. Let me make this that opportunity. And to be quite honest,
you got paid instead of paying for grad school.
Right. I got paid to go to school. and I really think that, particularly even just the first nomination, which was maybe 3 or 4 months in, was just a direct result of me paying attention and trying to really incorporate what I learned from each of those people and try to absorb it and incorporate it as soon as possible, So yeah, it was definitely.
I want to cut that out and repeat it for people. Like, people need to listen. Like, really, when you're given an opportunity to pay attention to those who have the experience without, you weren't asking for any guidance. You were taking it all in yourself. You opened your eyes to that experience and took it all in.
I make it a point whenever, I work a lot in the theater in New York. And the one thing that we have in that process is the benefit of not just discussion, but sculpting and repetition. It's part of the process in terms of really honing something. When you get out in on camera, you kind of, that's it. It's that day. So whatever honing that or process you need to do before it's a different thing, right? It's on you to kind of be there and be ready. So instead of trying to think of I just sat and took a notebook and watched the people who had been doing it and excelling at it for decades and just took those lessons, and some stuff I still use. Absolutely.
Is there, you mentioned a few names of those who you watched. Is there something you could name now from one of them that you know that you learned from them? Justin, Kim, Michael.
I don't want to give out, my toolbox.
Don't give your secrets away.
I don't want to give my secrets away, but let's add so what I loved about what I learned from Justin, I think it was kind of the same thing that I really like about Michael Keaton. You can hit that character with anything, but there is, even in the avoidance of a situation, it always lands, and there's always a recognition, and it always resonates, even if it's something that gets stuffed down. And I always thought that kind of continuous engagement is so important. Kim is really great at that too. Even if it's, A, B, B, A, then C comes in, she does not ignore the fact that it's going in another direction. And even if we're supposed to head in this way, you have to, it's almost like improv comedy. You have to acknowledge and accept everything that's taking place. So, and it's almost like being in college. It comes down to, a lot of times, it comes down really to listening, right? Listening to your scene partner and acknowledging that whatever is happening with them is not to be dismissed. It's actually, it has value, and you have to deal with it. Because I feel
tropes
are really, they were more than anything, they were like, in many ways, a volleyball or a ping pong or squash or tennis match, more so than any other sport. I feel like
Oh
the
yeah.
narrative in those stories gains strength, right, from the back and forth or the the circular nature of,
Right.
so it was, those were the tools I was trying to sharpen, working with them.
But I love that you used the opportunity. Not everybody realizes that they're in that
Right.
you all have that same opportunity to do the same thing you did. It's just not everybody uses it.
I saw Locke Jr. He and I
I
used
love
to live in the same neighborhood a few years ago.
Oh, that's
And he
awesome.
says his pop's doing all right. And he said, yeah, man, I remember because I used to, on different days, if I was particularly having a light day and I knew I was going to be there all day, I would like choose a department. And I would
Oh,
go and follow sound around. As a musician, sound was easy for me because I would know like the different microphones or how to use the sound meters. So I do a day with them and just see how they were doing their rigs and see how it was, what the signal was and where was it going. And then a different day, I would follow whoever had the light meter and try to understand,
good for you. That's
well,
really,
it's
free
better than
schooling.
getting in trouble for horsing around,
Yeah.
which
Or
I've
yeah,
had plenty of.
leaving the studio or sleeping in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mentioned two-time Emmy winner. What do you remember about that first Emmy win? What stands out in your mind?
I absolutely wasn't convinced that it wasn't going to happen. I was so excited just to kind of be invited to the party. It was very early on, so I was sort of still adjusting and figuring out what's what and all of that. My mom called and she told me, "I'm coming." I said, "Well, Ma, you're okay, but I mean, I'm
I just had a
I'm a
flashback to
23 I'm
seeing
a
that. Yeah.
23-year-old kid. Like, it's not like I'm making all the money for all the trips and, and she doesn't matter. I'm coming there to support you. I said, okay. And this is actually a great story. And so she comes and we're, doing our stuff. And I thought it's great because she'll come to the studio and then the girls will do her makeup and then it'll be, $300 makeup job. She'll be so excited. And she comes and we're at the studio and we're getting ready. And I think I'm doing some press or this or that. I was living on St. Mark's
Oh, fun.
between first and second. And we come uptown. We're at the studio. She's getting her makeup done and she stops and she just goes ice cold. "What's wrong, Ma?" She said, "You forgot my dress."
Oh my.
I said, "I don't wear dresses, Mom. How did I forget your dress?"
Oh.
Adamant, "You forgot my dress." Okay. And that night, that day, there was a UN gathering. Bill Clinton was in town, so the whole East Side is locked up
Yeah.
in Midtown, particularly on the East Side. So I thought, okay, I've got to get this dress. I run out into the street. There were limousines out in front of the studio because people had to go do different things. I stole somebody's. We head flying downtown. I said, "We got to get down there. We have to get back. Yeah, I'm short on time. I apologize." The driver was like, "No problem. We're going to get there. No problem." And we get down in front of my house. And I get to the front door. And I was living in a garden level apartment, so I could get down from the stairs to my own front door. And I get to the front door, and my keys are at the studio.
Oh my
And so the
God.
driver, this gigantic Polish guy named Ander, he was like 6'6". He was like, "No problem, no problem." And he goes and gets a hammer from his trunk, not even like just a regular hammer, and comes down to my door, which was a steel, and demolishes it. He just demolishes it, and it opens into my apartment. He tears the thing off, and there's hinges and knobs flying. how's that? So I go in, I get her stuff, we get all this stuff, what are we gonna do? He goes, he gets some nails, close the door from the inside. He hammers the nails into the concrete. Like, he has to imagine this mountain of a guy standing in my kitchen, hammering my door closed. We exit out the other exit into the lobby. We're heading back. Unbelievable. And then he ended up on 2nd Avenue on the sidewalk. So we get back, we do all of that stuff. We get to dinner. I'm nervous, so I'm eating a little, drinking probably a little too much, but just nervous.
Yeah, of course.
I thought, Nathan, Philly, and Jonathan Jackson, one of these guys who's been here for Shamar, one of these guys who's been here for a while is going to win. We're just, yay, we get to come, sort of thing. And I tell all the World cast, my mom is probably your biggest fan. So there's a whole album that's about this big of her with the entire cast.
That's
I'm not even in the pictures. It's just her, hanging out with the entire cast. And we get to the show, and this is the embarrassing part of the story. We get to the show, and I'm one of those people I get nervous, and I'm starting to run my mouth, and I'm talking. And we're sitting in the theater, and I'm on the aisle, right? And on the aisle is always a very specific thing. It can be or not, right? Or they need to be able to get a shot of you or access something. And I think my award was the second of the night, but the first one was game show. And they started introducing all the game shows, and they got to The Price is Right. Now, when I was a kid, I didn't like that show. I didn't like the decor. I didn't like the style. I didn't like the music. I thought that weird microphone Barker had, like all of it, I didn't like it. And so they started talking about The Price is Right. And I'm nervous. I'm just running my mouth. And I'm like, are you serious? The Price is Right. And again, they haven't changed their sets in 72. They're still selling rice-a-roni. And I'm just like running off the mouth. And my mom is punching me in the leg, and Kim is punching me in the other leg. And the winner is Bob Barker. And he stands up right in front of me.
Oh my.
He had heard everything. And I'm talking about like a 7-minute rant, right? And turned down at me and gave me the ice eye and walked upstage to go and get his Emmy.
That is a good story. I would like to have seen your face when he stood up.
It was like Darth Vader. Yeah. Not with the vacuum. No vacuum. Yeah. Sorry. I'll do it later. So we,
I
we
would have
finished
loved to have seen your face.
And then I go backstage, because backstage you do all the press after, while the show's still on, and he's standing there looking at me, and I raised my magic talisman, right, to defend myself. The rest of the night was fantastic. We had a lot of fun. Everyone leaves. I think we were at didn't they have like that model cafe across the street for a little while? I think that's where we were, across from Radio City. And then I end up back in the place, and there were Rockettes, and they invited me to come on stage in the center of them to do the Radio City kick step on the stage at Radio City.
Wow. That same night?
Same night. And I was like, this is insane. And so I leave with my stuff and walk out into the street to get your cab to get home. This is still, for those of you who are listening, 1995, 1996, and I'm still black, so you can't catch a cab. And I'm heading uptown to Harlem, so you definitely can't catch a cab. And I'm standing out in the street, waiting to see if I can't. And there's a young beat cop out there. And he says, yo, man, I can't get that. It was you that won that earlier, right? That's like an Emmy right there. I said, it is. And he's like, can I hold it? And I said, "Can I hold your heater?" And he gave me his service weapon, and I gave him my Emmy.
Oh my God, that's great.
And
Those
then,
are great New York stories.
and then he flags me down a cab. Oh,
Wow.
it's not over. So I take the cab and I head downtown, and the party for this was at Webster Hall, which was 2 blocks from where I lived. It was perfect. And I go in there, and a good friend of mine who had been my roommate in college, who was also like a Hollywood producer now, he was telling the bouncers, "No, it's my roommate. He just won. I promise. I swear." You know, the bouncers. So they let him in, and we're all hanging out like, "We can't believe this is happening. This is amazing. This is magic." And I look up. Who's standing there? My mom. Just standing there in her Emmy dress in the middle of a nightclub.
I love that. Webster Hall, no less.
Of all places.
Yeah,
Top
of
floor.
all places. Yeah.
She didn't have keys again. So I had to walk out, leave the party, and walk my mommy home, and then come back and hang out with my friends. And then the next morning, everywhere I went, it was like this, because apparently people were watching. And that is
that's awesome.
That is one of my top 5 long form New York.
That's a good memory. Jason said, "Wow, Kevin Mambo looks exactly the same as he did 25 years ago."
Lighting.
And one of our other fans, he was curious, what actors inspire you today?
I am a huge fan of, these days I've been going back and watching a lot of Meryl Streep. A lot of real quiet actors. What's this? What's it? Wait a second. I'll tell you right now, to be quite honest. I am also a really, really big fan of John Cazale. And periodically I go back and just sort of watch all the stuff that we have. I just love his ability to just be so still. So still. And I found working on Hit and Run, being able to play a detective, we had a very film noir style on this show. I mean, I'm in a a big coat and fedora and the whole thing. And there is something to be said for being able to have a quietness and stillness whereby you're still figuring out what's happening and what's coming next, etc. But where the audience can come to you and meet you in discovery, as opposed to laying it all out. I think I tell my students, it's like it's like a comedian who laughs so heartily at their own jokes. You don't leave anything for your audience to do.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the kind of actors and performers I'm trying to see where that middle ground is. I think I was watching, who was it, Jesse Plemons the other day, and
is he Friday Night Lights
and
Fargo?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I love him.
Yeah, and it's that same thing. And I've been watching a lot of Philip Seymour Hoffman as well, and it's that same thing. So I'm trying to sort of, I work a lot in the theater and I work a lot as a musician. So a lot of the stuff I do is out here, and so I've been sort of trying to develop a closer space.
Well, speaking of theater, you made your Broadway debut in Fella. You've appeared in Book of Mormon. Is there a favorite role you've had on stage to date?
I would have to say, I mean, and I do work a lot with, the Public, Signature, a lot of the big off-Broadway houses, which is really one of my favorite places to be. It's where a lot of the really daring and intelligent work gets done.
It's where it all begins.
Yeah, and I really feel fortunate. Being a part of Color Purple was fantastic, but being able to do something as different and revolutionary and as counterculture to Fela on a Broadway stage hasn't been done before. We'll see if it'll be done again. I'll probably try to do a revival in a couple of years. Given the climate that we're living in now, the material of that show is so much more relevant than it's ever been. But I did a turn as in development and then in production, playing Junior in Fortress of Solitude, which was the musical based on the book written by Jonathan Lethem. And to be able to play like this really intelligent, deep, and yet tortured and hamstrung singer, but find the ways to make it human and not cliche, right? I'm a big fan of working in teams and problem solving.
Do you have a dream role that you have been dying to play?
Well, apparently Black Panther's been taken. I had always,
that would be amazing, but hey, there's not just one black superhero.
That's true. I had always wanted to do Shaka Zulu, and I think there's a company that's looking to do it now. So I'm hoping to see if I can find a way into the company. But as a horn player, I have been working on something about John Coltrane for a long time. And I think 20 years from now,
there will be a time for me to play Nelson Mandela.
So
wow,
I'm not done yet.
Oh my God, that was like perfection. Holy crap, that was good.
I'm not done yet.
That's awesome. Well, that is a good way to end, my friend. I don't know if you worked with Nancy Williams-Watt. She was a writer at Guiding Light, but she says that Emmy story is a movie right there. That one night is a movie.
It's like a Ferris Bueller.
Totally.
Just Oprah running around in the background,
She probably was there at the Emmys.
She was.
Yeah.
Yes, she was.
For sure. Kevin, it is so good to see you, my friend.
It's great to see you too, Alan.
Thank you so much for spending time. The fans were really excited to see you today.
Absolutely.
Keep up the great work.
We'll be
Keep
back.
it up.
Absolutely.
And stay safe. Tell everybody. I know you
sadly please
you had COVID
safe.
at
let's not pretend that this belongs to a party or that this is about some large global conspiracy. The fact of the matter is, and my parents were in medicine, the fact of the matter is, the sooner we as a bell curve can get healthier, we will not experience what will be the next 2 or 3 deadly strains that will emerge from this. So really, really, really make it a point. I mean, I have an appointment to get my booster 2 days from now. And it's the first day that I can get it. It's the first day that I can get it because I will never, if I can, have it again. I had it for 4 months. I had never been so sick. I have never been so sick. I lost like 20, 25 pounds. It was terrible. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. So, people, stay healthy now. Don't wait to get into the hospital and then ask for treatment. Just stay on top of it now.
It's too late at that point, sadly.
It really is. And the damage that you can do to your body, we don't know what the long-term effects of the damage is. I'm going to work with long-term effects of immunization as opposed to damage from this virus because it's terrible. So I urge everyone, not just for yourself, but for your elderly parents, for your, children, for your grandchildren, you live in an ecosystem. So if not for you, for them.
Perfect way to end, my friend. Stay well.
It's good to
Great
see you.
to see you. You
Take
too.
care,
Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Kevin, for stopping by today. Check out Hit and Run on Netflix. Join me tomorrow when Emmy-winning soap opera writer and soap opera scribe Patrick Mulcahy joins me live. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, you can do so down below. Turn on the notifications for reminders of all upcoming shows. Have a great evening, everybody. And most importantly, stay safe.